A crate of servers sat in a customs hold in late 2022 and never moved. The most thermally demanding data center chips Nvidia had ever built, flagged under Commerce Department export rules, stopped at the border. I looked at that image and drew the obvious conclusion. Without the hardware, the build stops. China's artificial intelligence ambitions were frozen at the dock. The thesis I was carrying was clean and comfortable. Nvidia out, China's progress paused. What I missed was not the crate. What I missed was the stack that crate was supposed to sit on top of. Every layer of software, silicon, and supply chain underneath it that I had never bothered to inventory. That inventory is what this is. Each layer is more uncomfortable than the last, and by the time you reach the bottom, the word containment means something different than it did at the top. The surface reveal came first, and it was the easiest one to dismiss. Huawei's Ascend 910B, by the company's own product announcements, is positioned as a capable substitute for Nvidia's highest-tier training chips. Independent third-party benchmarks under controlled conditions do not confirm parity. That caveat is real, and I will return to it. But Alibaba Cloud, Baidu, and ByteDance all publicly disclosed procurement shifts toward domestic accelerators after 2022. The direction is documented even if the exact magnitudes are analyst estimates, not audited figures. Cambrican, Byron, and Moore threads accelerated product timelines according to reports, though production volumes are not publicly verified. Picture a city that loses its main water line. Engineers reroute through a dozen smaller pipes that were already half dug before the main broke. The pressure is lower, the system is messier, but the taps run. By Huawei's own public figures, domestic Ascend clusters are operating at a scale comparable to the generation of training workloads that Nvidia's earlier high-end chips were designed to handle. That is a football field of servers that Nvidia's sales team will never invoice. The surface story was that the chip gap was the story. It was not. The harder layer is software. CUDA, Nvidia's programming environment, is not a chip. It is the dialect that roughly a decade of researchers learned to think in. Every model architecture, every gradient calculation, every debugging session for 10 years was shaped by that environment. The institutional weight of that is not a hardware specification. It is collective muscle memory, and muscle memory does not transfer. It has to be overwritten. Huawei describes its compute architecture for neural networks as the alternative. Developer adoption figures are not independently audited, but reports suggest Chinese research institutions and cloud providers have ported major open-source training workflows to run on domestic accelerators. The Chinese government has included domestic toolchains in national procurement standards, according to public policy announcements, though enforcement depth is an analyst estimate. The performance gap estimates from neutral parties vary widely. What is not contested is that the rewrite happened. The controls forced it. A decade of dependency on one programming environment was not a reason to wait. It was the assignment. I think this is the part most observers underpriced, and I want to be direct about it. This is not theater and not temporary. A software ecosystem that accumulates a year of engineering time becomes stickier than it was the year before. Every quarter that Chinese engineers spend tuning model libraries for domestic silicon is a quarter that widens the gap between what a foreign chip offers and what the domestic system already assumes. The moat being built is not the chip. The moat is everything that makes the chip legible to the people using it, and that moat compounds. Then the capital moved. That is the third layer, and capital is the part that does not reverse easily. Chongjin Memory Technologies has been cited in analyst reports as scaling dynamic random access memory production. High bandwidth memory yields are reported as lagging SK Hynix and Micron, but improving, though no independent fab audit is public. Baidu's large language model lineage and Alibaba's publicly named model family are committed to domestic hardware roadmaps in investor and regulatory filings. The volume of government artificial intelligence procurement directed at domestic silicon is an analyst estimate from public tender databases, and the exact figures are contested. Here is the binding constraint that the capital has not yet solved. Memory bandwidth for a frontier model is like the diameter of a pipe, not the pressure inside it. You can make the pump faster, but if the pipe is narrow, the flow caps regardless. Each high bandwidth memory stack is thinner than a human hair, and stacking those dies with the interconnect density that high-tier training demands, requires process yields that, by public reports, China's fabs have not matched at volume. That is not a sanction problem. That is a physics and process problem, and it deserves to be named exactly that way. The three strongest objections to the bullish read deserve to be stated without flinching. First, almost every domestic chip performance figure in Chinese state media or company announcements lacks independent replication under controlled conditions. The H100 parity claim for the Ascend 910B has not been stress tested by a neutral third party with full access. Benchmark theater is a real risk. Second, building a software ecosystem, a memory supply chain, and a model development contract base simultaneously is expensive in a way that matters. A system that functions but costs dramatically more per unit of throughput is a strategic liability in a cost-sensitive market, and reports suggest the throughput per dollar disadvantage is real. Third, extreme ultraviolet lithography, the process required to manufacture at the nodes where Nvidia's current generation operates, remains controlled by one Dutch company, and those shipments to China have been blocked or restricted under export rules aligned with United States policy. No credible report suggests a domestic alternative at production scale. This is glass, light, and chemistry at tolerances measured in single-digit nanometers. Software does not fix it. Capital investment accelerates the search but does not guarantee the result. Taken together, the performance claims warrant skepticism until independently verified. The capital model is fragile if political commitment wavers, and the advanced node gap is real, with a long and speculative timeline to close. And yet none of that dismantles the structural observation. The ecosystem architecture now exists inside the border, and an ecosystem that exists is harder to dismantle than one that doesn't. That is a different problem than the one the controls were designed to prevent. The stack I dismissed in the first paragraph is what I cannot stop looking at now. The controls were built on a model of fixed dependency: no chip, no model, no industry. That model assumed the dependency would stay where it was. It didn't. The dependency became the assignment. Every blocked import became a line item on a domestic procurement list. Every missing library became a funded research project. The sanction that was supposed to preserve the gap was also, structurally, a specification document for how to close it. That is not a policy failure in the ordinary sense. It is a policy that succeeded at exactly the wrong level. It removed Nvidia's revenue while funding the institutional knowledge that is being built to replace it. My honest read is that both the bullish case and the bearish case are true at the same time, which is not a comfortable place to land. The bullish case is that the ecosystem is now past the point where tightening the controls further closes the gap. The institutional knowledge is already inside the border, and it is compounding. The bearish case is that the advanced node ceiling and the capital inefficiency put real limits on how far this goes, without a domestic extreme ultraviolet breakthrough that no one has a credible timeline for. I hold both. I do not think you get to choose one and ignore the other. I started by assuming the blocked crate was the story. The story was what got built in the warehouse next door while everyone watched the dock. The stack is what got built. The sanction didn't fail. It just filed the blueprints under a different name. If you were advising a Western artificial intelligence company right now, not a government, but a company with a product roadmap and a cost structure, what is the move when your competitor's constraint becomes their competitive moat? Leave your actual answer below, not the obvious one. If this kind of read is useful to you, the subscribe button keeps it coming. No algorithm games, just the next layer down.